Good into you. In America today, the political games continue over financial reform, despite the very real effect that this back and forth has on every single one of us, ordinary Americans. The Senate Goldman Sachs hearing shining that much more light on the shenanigans that continue to this day to play out on Wall Street. Nearly 2 years after the financial meltdown and subsequent and ongoing taxpayer-funded bailouts for the banks in this country, both Republicans and Democrats are united on one front. Both want to appear to be angry at the big banks.
How much of that deal did you sell to your clients after? Two things I'm getting out of these hearings. Number one, nobody did anything wrong. This was a natural disaster like a hurricane hit.
We're trying to hone in on why I've got so many unemployed people in my state and why so many people that I work for in Missouri have lost incredible amounts of money in their pensions.
And we're learning even more stunning details today about Goldman, that Goldman urged explicitly its salespeople to so-called arm themselves against the housing drop that Goldman was exposed to by promptly dumping Goldman's investments onto unwitting clients that Goldman, in theory, was paid to represent. Think of the dumb German as the sucker, or I should say client, for Goldman Sachs. So, of course, with shady acts like the ones we just described, our politicians must be working round the clock to put an end to this travesty. Except so far, their only response has been to deliver to the banksters gobs of our tax money to this day, as you know, accounting relief and an infinite supply for our friends at Goldman Sachs to go around with $2 billion abacus bets that you pay out on. The money that the banks make often donated straight back to the political campaigns, which is why you have politicians and bankers trying to preserve this crazy culture of bank gambling, and then the money goes back to the politicians, and you and I both know it. Republicans and Democrats, both raking in tens of millions of dollars from Wall Street to fund their 2010 re-election campaign. Forget the past. Earlier this afternoon, for a third straight day, Republicans united to block a floor debate on financial reform. Now, the Democrats have fired back and are vowing to pull an all-nighter, or vowed to pull an all-nighter. In the face of that threat, Republicans may be willing to cave, apparently. GOP leaders meeting later this hour to present an agreement to their members that they think could gather the votes to finally open up a floor debate for all of us on this issue. Democrats say it's about time.
It's very difficult for me to comprehend senators, Republican senators, coming to the floor and nitpicking this bill. We don't say this bill is perfect, but we worked really hard to get it where it is.
Well, Republicans, after months of promises, finally out with their plan today, a counter-proposal, if you will. But if you were hoping that the opposition plan would be stronger than the weak plan that we've been offered by the Democrats, think again. The Republicans' plan actually worse, except for the fact, and there's one key point in the Republican plan, that it does establish underwriting standards and capital requirements for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are the vehicle that the government uses to create all this bank gambling money. That's where the risk goes. We know the bonuses go to the bankers, but that's, again, an issue apparently the Tea Party, for instance, doesn't care about, but I digress. The Fannie-Freddie issue completely unaddressed by the Democrats. Either way, financial reform between the Democrats and the Republicans, a race straight to the bottom. The Republican plan does not call for big banks to chip in for a resolution fund. The Republicans rightly concerned that this sends a bad signal to the markets and creating two classes of business, a special fraternity and everybody else. But neither plan, the Republicans or the Democrats, do anything to stop the implicit threat of too big to fail institutions, 6 of which have more than 2/3 of the assets of this country right now, including your pension, so they can honestly tell the government to do whatever they want, which they are. The Republican plan sets no capital or liquidity requirements. Instead, calls for so-called stress tests on a case-by-case basis. And when it does become apparent that a bank is now, in effect, too big to fail, the Republican proposal gives all the power to the U.S. Treasury Department to prevent collapse, to be able to override all regulators at the Treasury. Now I will remind you how well that went with our last Republican Treasury Secretary and too big to fail institutions.
Today, I am announcing that the Treasury will purchase equity stakes in a wide variety of banks and thrifts.
You don't say. Unfortunately, the Democrat solution isn't much better. They merely create a pittance, a tiny rainy day fund of sorts, paid for by the banks to help dissolve them if their size threatens the economy, but they acknowledge two classes of bank, one with an implicit guarantee that can destroy everything that's outside of that fraternity. A $50 billion fraternity, if you will. No small banks allowed, no small bank lending in your town. And that, just a drop in the bucket when you compare it to the $4.6 trillion. Each trillion is $1,000 billion of our future wealth, theoretically. Currently, though, being paid out to our bankers, mostly by the Federal Reserve. Here's the bottom line. It does not matter which party's bill you look at. Neither the Democrats' plan nor the Republicans' plan have a plan to stop the following model for American finance. Gambling by the too-big-to-fail banks with your pension money and their leverage. They make the bets. We provide the wheelbarrow of cash. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, that's your plan for financial reform. Printing presses and accounting fraud. And it's happening at the expense of you, me, and every future person in this country because of the money machine that the bankers have running to pay off our politicians.